Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It is Sunday, the 7th of December, and it's 10:35 p.m. Now, tonight, I want to pick up where I left off yesterday because I was just getting to the main point by the end of the podcast. And this idea of a breach. A breach of our hologram, if you will. Now, to be fair, there have always been hacks down here. So there have always been hackers. A hack is something that affects the outcome of our reality. And in a sense, we're all hackers, okay? You know, if you're not co-creating with the Supreme Being and you're developing consciousness, you're a hacker. That sounds so severe when I say it out loud. And it is. It is quite severe. So I guess the first thing to do is to define what a hack is. A hack is magic. A hack is sorcery. A hack is illicit relations with non-physical entities for material gain on this plane. A hack is illegal trading in human biologicals, blood, genetics, for favor on this material plane. You see, granted by whatever beings they're working with. We talked about Michael Sarion and the Macrobes and the Enochian magic of Dee and Kelly, which is a famous story in magical circles, going back 500 years. So, we often think about the time we're living in as the most modern. Many people say this. Well, the world we're living in today is so much more advanced and so different than the world of the past. And it's true, it is. It's so alarming that I'm quite amazed that nobody's written a book about how it debunks evolution. How could the same creature, genetically, the same creature that's been here for 5,000-6,000 years, the Homo sapien, go from outhouses to modern telecommunications, space, rockets, automobiles, everything that defines the modern world? It doesn't make any sense when you think about it. I've spoken about this at length on the Talamanca Review. I'm not going to redo it. Wrote a chapter about it in Stardust Ranch, so I don't want to redo that. So if evolution is bunk, then what's guiding us and what is unfolding us collectively? Okay. Now, first, evolution is not bunk. Okay? What we're interpreting as evolution is the spiritual principle of adaptability, because the spirit dictates what the container has to be to survive in this realm. And when the spirit dictates to the matter changes, the cells change. for the most part, this is unconscious. It happens in all mammals. Okay? It's unconscious. It just happens. Very few things escape what we call evolution. But there are things on the planet that have not really escaped have escaped evolution, in a sense. So you got alligators, crocodiles, cockroaches, sharks. Sharks have been about the same for 1,000,000 years. I was watching a podcast today, and it was a woman, a scientist, a PhD, and she was talking about a people in Indonesia who do deep diving. I think it's related to fishing, sustenance, things like this. And when their spleens were examined, their spleens were different than other human beings. And this allowed them to hold their breath for much longer. And she postulated the necessity of them going into the water to survive was the spirit speaking to the matter to change the body to suit their circumstance. You'll see similar things in the Nunavut, the northern people of Canada, who live a remarkably difficult life from our perspective. To them, it's their normal, okay? And they've also been noted to have different physiological traits that are the product of evolving in their environment. And one more example would be the Sherpas in Nepal, who take people on their treks to summit Everest. They've been tested to have one of the highest performances on lowest oxygen levels on the planet. Okay, so they can when the air starts to get really thin, most people, normal people, they pass out or they can't function physically. The Nepalese Sherpas can. And it's another example of an individual evolution by a people based on the necessity of environment. Now, let's stop and think about this for a moment. Let's think about the divers in Indonesia. Let's think about the Nunavut. And let's think about the Sherpas in Nepal. Physical environment demands a physical change for the people to survive. The matter acquiesces and changes for them. The matter being the body, the spirit being the will to live, the soul being the occupant of the entire enterprise. Okay? Now, there might be something where an incredible desire is connected with the evolutionary principle. And the desire to live is the strongest desire in the world, except for depressed Manhattan socialites and debauched Los Angeles celebrity agents. It's funny how that will to survive can work in reverse sometimes. Like the people with the suicidal tendencies are never they're all the people everyone thinks they want to be. And the people who are the exact opposite and who embrace life, and life and God are synonyms on the Talamanca Review, they adapt, they overcome, they evolve. So evolution is real in that principle. But the natural mechanism Darwin tried to capture, he didn't spiritualize it. Remember the interview with Kat where she pointed that out? That we're a product of evolution. And this is extremely important. I got to get this right. So what I'm talking about here is something, I guess the only thing that comes to mind right now, and this is off the top of my head. In fact, I've already deviated from what I had notes on my iPad about what I was going to talk about tonight. I swear to you, I have no control over how these podcasts are going to come out. It's just like the moment happens and things change. I've opened my notes. Maybe I'll get to them later. So the only way I can think of to explain this is a trinity, which will get your head chopped off if we end up under Noahide law. But my trinity would be the supreme being, which, remember, in my lexicon, that's an object we call God and a subject we call self-realization. So the object we call God and the subjective experience we call self-realization are the same thing. That's worth thinking about for a moment. There's a lot happening in that linguistic observation. So God is not an object, and self is not subjective. God is not objective, and self is not subjective. Subjectivity and objectivity collapse in higher states of consciousness. So the Trinity is the supreme being, the spirit. Now the spirit would be the psychic architecture of a human being. Thought, feeling, memory. And remember, these things have internal definitions based on limited consciousness and metaphysical definitions where each of those ranges of consciousness can go outside of the physical incarnation. We have examples on this planet of people who can access the memory of the planet for millions of years and tell us what's gone on this planet. The founder of Falun Gong is one of these guys. There's certain teachings focus on time. Okay, the Buddhists, in the New Age, we call them Akashic record readers. The mind can go outside of the body and can conceptualize the structure of the universe. This is what physics is trying to do. But again, physics is having problem with the subject-object dichotomy. However, they've noted it in things like the observer phenomenon, brilliantly captured in a Coen Brothers film with Billy Bob Thornton, called The Man Who Wasn't There, in which his lawyer, he's charged with murder, and his lawyer is explaining the observer effect to him and what it means to his ability to manipulate the jury. The observer effect is that an object loses its object value the moment we put our attention on it. Our attention, the human attention, changes the object. And so it's not in its original state. I don't know how they came up with this. Maybe this is happening at a subatomic level. I don't really follow the math. I'm an experience guy. Everything I know by experience, the experience of my own consciousness, and the tie-offs I get, which is the spiritual ladder. A tie-off is a rung in the ladder back to the Supreme Being. Something is given to you internally. It seems ludicrous, and it miraculously ties off in your outer timeline to make sure you double underline it, triple underline it, and realize, hey, this is true. So the Supreme Being, or our primary being, our soul, is one part of the Trinity. Our spirit, our thoughts, feelings, memories, is the second part of the Trinity. And the third part of the Trinity is matter. Okay? So evolution works when the spirit refuses to give up life. The mind, the emotions, the heart, the mind refuses to give up life, and through the power of the Supreme Being in us, the soul, forces a change upon matter. Okay? I gave you 3 examples. There's probably, all of you listening can think of more. Okay? Now, the transformations that happen in the body may take several generations to achieve. Okay, so we see the spirit operating on matter to perform the miracle of transformation over time. And it's a generational task. This speaks to the idea of bloodlines and collective effort in spiritual evolution, because all evolution is spiritual. Consciousness is evolving to the primary state of being, the supreme being, the object that doesn't exist and the subject that doesn't exist, the unity of the two. That's what it's always moving towards. And it has the ability to miraculously transform matter. Now, in mammals that have collective souls, and see, in fact, the idea of collective souls exists even in human incarnations now. It wasn't always this way, but it does. Okay? Or where an elemental soul will populate a number of human beings in a family or a tribe. And that elemental soul is not an individuated soul. Okay? And the same thing happens in mammals below the human form. And so in those instances, it would be the elemental soul that forces the mutation to change the creature, the mammal, to continue to survive on the physical earth. Now, you may find this crazy, and I can only say it's a belief. I don't know this to be true, but I do believe it. I believe there's a group of these DARPA-type people, and whatever the DARPA equivalent is in the Soviet Union, because remember, they got a good number of the paperclip people as well, so we have to assume that this craziness exists in their society as well. Maybe it ended at the end of the Cold War. I don't know. I don't think so. Why would that go away? So these are examples of, in a sense, of miracles. And I believe there are groups of people who really, literally, understanding what I'm telling you tonight, would find it interesting to put the human race through a massive radiation event to see what groups of human beings can evolve out of it to absorb radiation. And I'm talking about a nuclear holocaust here. That's what I'm talking about. I believe there are people who would want to see that happen, just as an experiment. I know that the Russians investigated heavily after Chernobyl. And I know that there were mutations that came about that demonstrated that the exposure to radiation, nuclear radiation, benefited the people and created a hyper-revolution in them. Isn't that interesting? So given that we live in a hologram and we're animated from the Supreme Being, which is eternal and indestructible and outside of time, always existed, always will exist, and we get this spiritual architecture or psychic architecture in the form of feeling, memory, and thought to channel the energy of the Supreme Being, we can transform matter. Now remember what I said about time. When you take the tribal examples like the Indonesians, the Nunavalik, and let's say the Japanese pearl divers, it takes generations to do this. Now, when a person achieves a certain state of individual development, they can transform reality almost instantaneously. In the human record, we call these miracles. That's what a miracle is. That's what Christ did. Allegedly. I wasn't there. But I have no problem believing it because miracles are going on today. If you're interested in this stuff, it's a fascinating study. Some of what these yogis have been able to do is mind-boggling. Some of what even the Christian mystics, like especially, there are some Eastern Orthodox mystics that went, usually women, that went right through World War II, and the SS was ordered not to touch them because Hitler feared them. They could heal people. They didn't get involved in the war. They only took care of the people around them in the village. But many miracles were recorded. And so a miracle is a contraction of this evolutionary principle. Okay? It's what it is, essentially. Fascinating concept. So this is a real butterfly wing one, this podcast. I actually had to pause the recording there and think for a few minutes because I want to make sure I get this right. I usually don't pause. I did last night. I'm starting to pause a lot more. I think I'm going to do it. Like, so a 55 minute video, it might take me on my end 90 minutes or 2 hours to do. And you'll just see these little cuts. And I'm just sitting here going like this, trying to think about what I'm going to say next. Okay, so I want to return to the idea of a breach. Okay, now, as I explained it yesterday, what I meant was, normally there's a distillation process. Okay, so it's almost like if you got a mason jar, and you actually have to do this in earthbag building. You get a mason jar about this big with a lid. You fill it up about a third of the way with the earth that you want to see if it qualifies for earthbag building. And then the other 2/3 of the mason jar you fill up with water. You shake it really good, like for a couple minutes, like 120 seconds. You just keep shaking, and you want to break it all up so that it's just particles. And then finally you put it down and you let it sit somewhere on a flat surface, and you come back in a few hours, or you come back the next morning after you've slept. And you'll get these sediment layers, and it'll be like, I think it's clay at the bottom, or sand at the bottom, and then clay. And then above it, if you wait long enough, the water will get clear. But you'll see two distinct layers. Like all the sand will settle together. It won't be mixed with the clay. And the clay will sit on top. And you'll see the ratio. You can see it with your eyes. So the earth you're dealing with for the earth bag house is like 60% sand and 40% clay. Perfect for earth bag building. Go ahead and build. But that sedimentation layer is a little bit like how this reality comes into manifestation. It comes from the Supreme Being. The energy of the Supreme Being descends into the world of concepts. And then from the world of concepts, everything descends down into a time track. And then from the time track, it descends down into a sensory track. And from the sensory or sensual track, the feeling track layer, I should say layer, not track, it descends down into matter. Okay? Now, this is why to say that the world we live in is an illusion, as my neighbor over the mountain does, a disposable plastic bag, don't worry about it, in a sense he's right. But also in another sense, no. And the reason it's not an illusion is that this world is animated by the same energy of the Supreme Being. And so the real staging ground in which the concept and the durability of the concept. Okay? And what durability would be? Its ability to persist in time. Because time is an entropic structure. Time disintegrates everything over time, except those things that can be renewed by spirit and by the Supreme Being. Okay? So a tree will grow, live, die, fall over, but more trees keep coming. So the Supreme Being aspect of it is the concept of trees. So an individual tree comes and goes, but trees are here forever until the Supreme Being redreams the whole thing. And that's happened a number of times here. And it is the Supreme Being redreaming the whole thing. Okay? A lot of times, like nobody who's watched the Talamanca review at length would call me soft on conspiracy theories or soft on an absolutely anti-human agenda on this planet. It's not that I don't see the negativity. I do. But the way my perception has evolved, I don't see it as conspiratorially as other people see it. I don't see it the same way the Gnostics see it. I don't see it the same way Jason Burchard at Burchard's at Archaics sees it. Okay, I don't see it that way. At the end of the day, for me, the Supreme Being is running everything down here, and the Supreme Being loves everything down here. Loves everything. It's unconditional love. Okay, that means even what we might call Satan is loved by the Supreme Being. The problem with Satan, if you understand the archetype and the mythology of it, is Satan habitually blocks the love of the Supreme Being because the ego refuses to believe anything could be above it. So it's simultaneously literal and figurative, which is what? Another example of the subject and the objective collapsing. When something is simultaneously literal and figurative, it means it's subjective and objective at the same time. Okay? Ergo, we get attached to our own constructions down here. And not just here, it's a big part of the astral as well, which is what the sensual world or the sensory world, okay? The world of Robert C. Monroe. And we refuse to let these things go, and we refuse to do what the Muslims tell us to do, which is submit to the will of God. And they're right when they say that. No, I'm not going to convert. If I was going to convert, I would have done it with the Sufis before they hexed me. But I'm not going to convert because I'm happy just being Bruce. I don't need to be a part of a religion. But at the same time, I have to point out that fundamental edict of Islam, which Islam means submission, is correct. I submit. Okay? So in that literal definition, I'm a Muslim. I submit to the will of God. Now, the will of God isn't perfectly expressed for me in the writings of Islam. Okay? And I generally am one of those people that has to learn the hard way. So my submission has come by me challenging and losing. Like Satan, like Lucifer, but unlike them who never give up, I just go, yeah, I get it. You're you, I'm me, and I got to get over this. Now, each of these worlds, including the physical, have different frequency ranges which make things invisible even in that world. So there's things in this physical world which are invisible to us, but can become visible if they so choose. And they live here physically with us, and they have the same physical requirements of economy. which would be food, rest, shelter. Water, food, rest, shelter. Okay? So there's these frequency ranges even within the bandwidth of a realm, like the physical. I always give the example of the duende here, okay? And they're very real. They're here all the time, especially when the kids are here. They love hanging around the kids and playing with the kids, and they spook them a lot, though. And then there are things that can jump the two primary dimensions, like the third dimension, which we call the physical world, and the solar system, and the galaxy, and the universe. That's all part of the manifest physical world. Then we have the fourth dimension, which is habitually called the astral world in occult literature and in mystical literature as well. And there's a significant difference between these two worlds. Like when you come into the physical, you can hardly remember the astral. You still have an astral body that's working through you so you can have sensory experiences. I always give the same example for the astral body. If you watch a YouTube clip of a skateboarder breaking his ankle, you'll feel a twinge in your ankle. Like you'll have a fit just seeing it, empathetically. So the astral body is very much the body of empathy. That's the empathetic body that feels these things. Okay? A good union between people in a marriage is astral-physical. Okay? You have to get along physically and you have to get along astrally. Okay? You can come from different bloodlines, but you have to, that requirement of two-dimensional cohabitation is important. Even if you're unconscious of the astral, you never go to the astral except when you dream. You still have to be astrally compatible with the person. Now, each of these realms is subject and just within one realm. Okay? Just within one realm. So let's take the physical realm. 99.9 repeating to 1,000 or 1,000,000 times. Okay? 99.9 repeating 1,000 times is the physical space of this galaxy that we will never experience physically because we don't have the means to go there. Our lives are too short. I mean, if something is 100 light years away, how are you going to get there in an 85-year life? So physically, we can't get there. We would have to do something to physically go there. Now, this is an important concept because a planet is a kind of training ground. You know, I've been watching this YouTube channel. My friend Neil sent me. He sent a short video a few weeks ago as the URL to it as a comment on a YouTube. And it's this gentleman named Crowder. I forget his first name. I think it's Joseph Crowder. But he's spent a considerable amount of time studying, reading the works of Robert C. Monroe. And it's very, very fascinating stuff. So, the space you can go is what we call the expansion of consciousness. Okay? So even in a physical life, if you travel, and so, you know, David Dubine and I spoke about this quite a bit in that I've republished that. He cleaned it up quite a bit on his end, and he does this whole video thing, and he sent it to me, so I have his permission to post it up on my Substack. Great guy, David. Great guy. Um, so even in this physical dimension, the growth pattern is the more profound your spirit gets. And one of the aspects of spirit is curiosity. Okay? So the further you travel, it's sort of representative of a greater curiosity. The ability to go to other cultures and adapt and assimilate is also indicative of, I think, an advanced human being. Okay? And not everybody can do it. Most people, they can't unlearn the habits of their own culture and assimilate to a new culture. Now, I'm not saying go to Papua New Guinea and join cannibals and start eating human meat. There are limits to assimilating to other cultures. But if you're in a generally benign culture, and that would be a culture that has education, some form of religious or spiritual culture, and most importantly, they love their children and raise their children with love, you're in a real culture. And it's non-toxic to you, so you can let down your guard, let that culture in, absorb it, and start to live in the way that those people live. And that experience, combined with the experience of your birth culture, expands what I would call your cultural consciousness. So my whole life, in a sense, has been a study of culture and what it is, how it evolves, how it affects people, why people will die for culture. I don't think it's worth dying for anymore after living in 3 or 4 cultures. After living in Canada, the United States, Taiwan, and Central America, I don't see culture as something worth dying for. Okay? Doesn't mean I want other people's cultures forced on me. I don't like the force of Islamic culture, convert or die. That's not something that's very attractive to me. Very sick aspect of that culture. But at the same time, this expansion of experience by living is the expansion of cultural consciousness. Now, I'm going to say something now that many of you probably don't know. Well, I should stop saying stupid shit like that because I get a lot of emails and I have a super smart listenership. So yeah, you probably do know this. When people rest between lives, they don't necessarily go that far from where they lived. So you would stay in what we call the earth astral. So just like there is a physical limitation to our ability to understand this one dimension we were born into, we hardly understand this solar system. Probably the most advanced understanding of this solar system is astrology. Okay? We hardly understand this galaxy, and we hardly understand this universe. Okay? Because those things are inaccessible to us. We can't go there and have physically direct experience. Okay? Very, very important point to understand. So the same is true of the astral. Okay? And this is why the human life is so important, because you can focus energy on this third dimension. And there's a lot of what we call the energy of the primary being here. And the energy of the primary being is not on every dimension in the force that it's on this third dimension, which is why an opportunity to be alive is an opportunity to know the Creator, the Supreme Being, and should not be taken lightly. And it should be lived with reverence and gratitude. Okay? It really should. I don't always maintain that. My cranky Scottish side gets the better of me sometimes. But as a principle, I try to live my life by gratitude. Okay? So believe it or not, the astral realm most people go to when they leave the physical body is not as expansive as you might think. Okay? For most people. Well, I don't know most, but a significant portion of people. Okay, those stories you get in a near-death experience are not the same thing as actually dying. Those are written into the incarnation before the soul comes in. so that they can have a very profound experience of God while they're physically alive. Okay? So all of this is like an incredible amount of verbiage to build up to the principal idea of this breach I'm talking about. So what the magicians did, and the dark magicians, the magicians who want to destroy existence because they have contempt for God, because they're infected with that satanic consciousness and they can't submit. Can't submit. They're power freaks. That's what is a principal characteristic of all of them. They're power freaks. They cannot submit to love. Okay? Now they can climb in consciousness quite high, actually. Quite high. Luciferian consciousness can be quite evolved. Okay? As I said, you get highly evolved Taoists that go bad and start doing remote viewing and seeing for criminal underworld triads, and they get paid millions of dollars. The cartels use black magicians and remote viewers to do all kinds of stuff. There's a chapter on that in The Light of Darkness where Bob was in Palo Mayombe. And so the breach I'm talking about, so what the magic has been concentrated on doing for the last, I couldn't say with any certainty, I'd say probably the last 200 or 300 years, when it really became organized. Okay? Now, this is a complicated topic because there's no protagonist. Everybody's an antagonist. Okay? Everybody's the villain. They're not the good guy. So the Reformation, the Enlightenment, broke the hold of the Vatican. The Vatican was completely corrupt. But to a certain extent, the Vatican was holding back the practice of this black magic. Okay? I know. They're into it now, but back then they weren't. Okay? You know, I think the modern Vatican is, if you can't beat them, join them kind of attitude. Especially since Vatican II. The reforms in Vatican II after World War II were specifically, and by the way, that was a peace treaty because the Vatican was deemed one of the losers of World War II. Okay? And they had to introduce all this stuff, the Freemasonry and everything, and they did, and the doors of evil were opened and it got in. And so, okay, so I'll explain this from personal experience. So, as I said numerous times on my podcast, I had this visit from a Ligurian shortly after I finished the book and put it up on Amazon. And it was the whole 6 or 7 months I worked on that book. It was very, very intense. And what happened was the intensity and the energy of the book, and writing a book is almost a form of ritual magic itself, unintentional. It's not coordinated ritual magic like the Satanists or the black magicians do, but it becomes an energy center. Remember the Trinity. So there's my physical body, there's my spirit, which is receiving the book, and the third thing is the book. So the book, me, the spirit. And that three things is the basis of this ritual performance. Now, the intensity of the book punctured a hole in my internal astral, or another way of saying it is opened a door, opened a portal internally in me. So the Ligurian did not physically manifest in my main house here on the mountain, manifested in my consciousness. But it was a true manifestation. So it was an astral manifestation. The portal, or let's say the portal or the wormhole I created writing the book, allowed them to sent out an energy. I sent out an energy signature writing the book, and that energy signature gets picked up light years away, light years away. So I want you to think about this for a moment. If there's life in this universe, and there is, but I'm not asking you to believe that, but if there's life in this universe, and we know what human beings can do, so we have examples of remote viewers reading the future, going to Pluto and telling NASA what Pluto looks like before any probe got there and being 100% accurate. Ergo, the consciousness literally went that distance, right? Those are human beings. You know, the Courtney Brown and the remote viewing and all of this stuff, they can go out into the galaxy and communicate with extraterrestrials. And we're this stupid little animal that lives 85 years. What do you think a physically incarnate race 5,000 light years away from us, that the average physical incarnation is 5,000 years, and they're building upon a culture that's 1,000,000 years old continuously? They don't have the ups and downs we have. What do you think they could do? Okay, so it's not just us, you know, the Courtney Browns and the Schwartzes or the Cliff Highs remote viewing and going out there. The stuff out there is remote viewing and coming here. Now, what happened was I created a portal, but the portal was not physical, it was astral. You see, when we talk about portals, we always conceptualize them on the physical. But in higher magic, the next level of magic, the magic the dark magicians have been working at for a couple hundred years and really showed us what they could do with fission and fusion, that was about puncturing huge holes or creating huge portals in the astral. Now remember how I described the physical. The astral is the same. Okay? So most sentient beings won't go too far away from the physical birth ground where they incarnate in between lives. They will stay close to what we call the earth astral. Now, other human beings, I mean, if you learn to do it when you're in the body, once you get out of the body, you're going to be able to go to all kinds of places, okay? That's why it's not a bad idea to do spiritual practice. Let me put it to you this way. Life is continuous. It's just in and out of bodies. It's continuous. Think of it like a sewing needle going in and out of the fabric. And the thread is your life story in the Akashic as a soul going through all of this, sewing the fabric. You know, so when the needle is out of the fabric and not stitching, you're out of your body. When the needle comes down and puts a stitch in, you had an incarnation. That's what life is like. It never really ends. We perceive it as ending because we haven't really understood. We don't understand death. And just that simple discovery of what death really is would end the control on this planet. That would be enough because people wouldn't fear dying. Okay? That would be enough to end the control on this planet. So what the dark magicians have done is a one-to-one match for what the Spaniards who betrayed Spain and the Vatican did when they opened the gates to the Moors. Okay? So the dark magicians have opened the gates to Earth's astral. And they've been working at this for a long, long time. Okay? Now, once something is in the Earth's astral, depending on what it is, it can project right into the physical, like in a sense, come and go, come and go. And those alliances the dark magicians have made would allow them to come and go, come and go, come and go as well, even while they're physically incarnate. And this is what I believe is going on in the world. I've never read this anywhere. I'm not the only thing I'm borrowing from is Michael Sarian talking about Dee and Kelly and the macrobes. Okay? And talking about the agenda. And the macrobes telling them, if you organize and study collectively as a race, it'll take you about 500 years to manifest this. And here we are 500 years later, and we know for certain we've got energy from matter through fission and fusion and the atomic weapons and nuclear reactors. But what hasn't been overtly demonstrated to us as a human race is the other end of that equation the macrobes spoke about, which is matter from energy. This is the second part of it. Now, I think the two things are hand in hand, like the yin-yang symbol. And so essentially what I think is going on is the earth is being flooded now on the astral and subsequently over time on the physical with elements of existence not native to this dimension astrally or physically, not part of the incarnational cycle here. And because of the nature by which they were invited, which would be fission and fusion, which is a highly destructive act, many of the races of beings which are non-physical or which have projected here are also very, very negative. Now, positive races have come in. We get these stories all the time in Air Force Intelligence and the OSI and things like that about all the warnings we've been given. But then there's human culpability. We're still a very negative race. I'm not going to say that because it's not fair to the human beings. I think we're actually a very good people. But I think our power and leadership has been habitually negative for millennia. And that's what the ETs would first interface with. And so when you go right back to the whole Eisenhower thing with the tall whites, we know from Cliff High, we know from other sources that there were two options. There was an extraterrestrial future for humanity presented in which we disarm, at least nuclear, and we advance in a much more positive and uplifting way. And this other Orion group came in and said, well, we'll give you more death technology. We'll teach you how to clone. We'll teach you, you can turn this place into all your satanic puppet show if you want. And that benefited that class of being that wanted to interact and illegally trade with us. Blood, genetics, human babies, all these things, okay? Now, I don't think anybody really knows what's going on now. It was interesting for me about a week and a half ago to catch up with Brian Rue. I haven't really spoken to him for 5 years. He's a big UFO guy. And Brian is convinced the hybridization program is very positive. I don't know. My gut says no. It's not good. Because the human instrument we've been given already is so good. And we have all kinds of examples of how good it is. Okay? This vessel can be illuminated by the Creator. Even some of these, on this dimension, the third dimension, even some of these advanced races that live 5,000 years and speed through wormholes and go all through galaxy to galaxy and all over the place, even many of those races can't be illuminated the way we're illuminated by the Creator because of, and the way we receive it, because of the density we live in. So if you can achieve the light of God in this density, it's a much more transformative experience. So this is the breach I was alluding to yesterday. I didn't really explain it super well. It took a lot tonight. I had to pause 3 or 4 times and really think this through. But I think we've been massively breached on the astral, and there's all kinds of shit. So look at the astral. look at reality like a Broadway play. When you're incarnate, you're in the audience. The drama is the theater, and the astral is what's behind the black curtain, the production. The astral is the staging ground for the physical, the production, the lights, the sandbags, the sets when they change the sets. In fact, theater is a very good example for how reality works. It's like a metaphor for how reality works. Now, I think there's a lot of extremely negative stuff behind the curtain now. And I think a lot of it came in after World War II. I don't think it's always been here. And I think because of our own behavior, we forfeited a lot of protection. I think the human race is kind of at a, with the orders of beings aligned with life. The human race is on a kind of probationary period right now. And, and this is where I do agree about how severe it is with my neighbor across the mountain, Shunyamurti. It is quite severe. I think we're going to make it. And I think that the experience we go through is going to produce a whole new human race. I think all of the artificial environment we've built is going to collapse. Because remember, go back to the beginning of this podcast when I spoke about the evolutionary principle. It's the energy of the Supreme Being in us working through our spirit to transmute matter. Okay? It's not this flat, stupid thing that's unintelligent and unanimated by the Creator that Darwin was talking about. And Darwin was one of them. He was a fucking goof. Okay? So I think we're going to make it. I think there's going to be, like, I posted a video today from this gentleman I was referring to that Neil turned me on to, Mr. Crowder. And he was talking about this gentleman, Schwartz, remote viewing out to 2050. He says all the cities go away. And everybody's kind of living like your buddy Bruce, in kind of in smaller communities spread out. And there's a massive population reduction. And I think this is part of the penalty for what we've been up to and how we can't find peace with ourselves and how we continue to fight over stupid things and how we can't let anything go. I can't help remember, as I end this podcast today, if I were to sum up the message of Christ in one word, it would be forgive. And he was the last great avatar to come to this planet to push a message out to the whole human race. And if you could distill it down to one word, it would be forgive. Right? Forgive them, Father, they know not what they've done. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I can't even remember the Lord's Prayer anymore. I used to have to say it every day in Catholic school. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Anyways, there's a line in the prayer, forgive my sins as I forgive the sins done against me, or something like that. But this idea of forgiveness is very important. And the human race hasn't learned that yet. And I think the next lesson we get on forgiveness is going to be some version of the lion instead of the lamb. Anyways, I'm going to call this the Breach Redo. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.